And now, following F1 testing, a statement from McLaren-Renault.
Hello, welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed. He's Zog.
Hello.
He's Richard.
Hello.
I'm Gareth, and if I could bring a car back from the dead, what I'd do is probably ask, I don't know, Tesla if they would build something that looked like the Lancia HPE, but with a four-wheel drive electric running gear, and build it in Wales. That would be the perfect car for me. And the reason why I'm saying this is that there's a bit of a fashion for the moment for taking old cars and equipping them with new technology. There are not just specialists doing it, but car manufacturers themselves are doing this. The case in point, Richard, you'll know about this, is Land Rover, who have taken some existing Land Rover Defender body shells and are going to make a limited run of, how many is it, 50?
150.
150, that's quite a lot, isn't it?
They've all sold.
Wow. So will they be newly registered, or are they going to have like 5-year-old registration plate when you buy them?
No, they're existing Defenders. They're running around out there somewhere, and Land Rover is buying them back. They're very late ones. Late, standard Defenders, buy them back, rebuild them. I think someone from Land Rover said they believe that, given it's 150 grand, that most people will put a private plate on it anyway, so it sort of doesn't matter. But they'll basically be probably sort of 15 or 65 plate, like mine is. You know, mine's a late Defender and it's on a 65 plate because it was registered in late 2015. So Land Rover trying to buy back low mileage, late model Defenders to build into these V8s.
Remanufacture them.
Yeah,
into these new,
it's weird because when they announced that car, I remembered something I'd seen. I went to the factory to see the last Defender coming off the line and this sort of closing down ceremony. And then we were taken outside and there was a big cavalcade of old Land Rovers. And around the back of the main factory building, there were a load of Defender panel sets on frames, the frames they used to sort of transport them into the factory to start building them. And there was just a load of them around the back. And I was like, what have they got those for? They've just made the last one. Why would they need those? And I started thinking, hang on. Are they keeping these back, knowing that later down the line they're going to announce this new V8? But no, I checked it with Land Rover and I went, have you kept some parts back for this? And they went, no, we're going to have to buy some cars in to make these, but they'll be completely rebuilt from the ground up. So they'll be effectively brand new cars, but you'll have to have it on an older plate, I think.
Of course, another major manufacturer that's doing the same thing is Jaguar, with the continuation D-types.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Aston Martin too, I believe, have done something, haven't they? Built some...
Yeah, so they're doing the DB4 GT lightweight.
That's right.
But these are new cars. These are brand new cars.
Yeah.
We featured them on the last series of the Grand Tour, and the really weird thing, the Aston was on a private plate. The Jag, they just registered on a 17 plate, and it looked really weird. Wow. That wasn't the D-type, so that was the XKSS, which was a second continuation after they did the E-type lightweight.
Yeah.
Then the XKSS, and now they're doing the D-types. The justification is always, well, we didn't build as many as we intended back in the day, or with the XKSs, 12 of them were lost in a fire at the factory, and so they're making up the numbers that were lost. So there's always some justification for it, and that limits the number they make. And fair play to them. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's quite cool. But...
No, I think it is. I agree with you. I suppose there are more people with silly amounts of money to spend on a plaything like that. They know they can sell these cars. That's a motivation.
XKSS recreation, £1 million. An actual XKSS, sort of, I don't know, 10, 12 more £1 million. So quite a bargain in that context.
But thinking about this idea of remanufacturing an old classic, and I'm sure any car nut can understand the idea of taking an old classic and just, it was great, but if only they'd done this to it, it would have been even better. Or you want that old car with contemporary brakes, for example.
This is where those... If it was a Lancia Monte Carlo, for instance. Yeah.
And go back, sort it out properly this time.
And do it right.
Exactly, do it properly. I guess one of the first cars that this happened with was the MGB. You could get heritage body shells, I think they were called, 20 years ago or so? Maybe
but then they were just a shell that you could buy to restore your MG. More recently, there's a company called Frontline who will completely modernise an MX-5 gearbox engine, actually, as well, I think, and do suspension work on it. And it always distracts me because apparently it's quite good, if you like that sort of thing. But the company's called Frontline, which is also the name of the fleece stuff I have to put on my dog's neck to stop her getting fleas. So every time I see someone go, oh, look, that Frontline MGB, I always think, well, now there's an MGB that hasn't got fleas.
Oh, actually, thinking about the MGB thing, didn't MG themselves make a small run of
MGR V8 with the V8 engine? I think that's what I was going to say.
Fair enough. They used the heritage shells with sort of modified wings and stuff like that. That was
I put the Rover V8 in
job,
the Buick
from Rover.
Yeah, that was probably the first example in contemporary times of that, I think. I think
possibly,
you're right.
So it's this idea of taking your old classic and doing it better isn't completely new, but it's a good thing.
There are three prongs to this, aren't there? Because they're talking about the recreated Jags and the recreated Aston DB4, but they are absolutely remade the way they were back in the day. There is no modernisation, particularly with the Jag. They've been incredibly faithful to the way it was made originally.
In fact, the people who build it have to smoke while they're building
they do,
it.
Or at least smoke a pipe, yes.
And actually
say, now look here.
Is one of the reasons for that at least some of the people buying them will want to use them for historic racing? Is that a factor?
Well, yes, but they're not eligible necessarily. There was a documentary about the lightweight E-Type on Channel 4. And they followed the making of it, but they also went and interviewed Lord March, and they went, now, of course, these cars, they look like the original lightweight E-Types. Will they be eligible to race at the Goodwood Revival? And he went, no. Certainly not. That was it. Which I thought was a little harsh, actually, because let's be honest, so many of those cars competing in the Goodwood Revival are not
rebuilds.
They're triggers Ferrari, aren't they?
Yeah, you've got a chassis plate from a 1925 car that you've riveted to.
Well, there's some pretty incredible rumours about some of those cars racing. And the
there are several race cars which have been split into several different cars.
Correct. There's a very famous line about the D-Type, isn't it? I don't know the exact line and the exact number. It's something like, there were only 25 D-Types built, and 27 of them are still running.
Exactly,
Which is like the four tops, though, isn't it? There's about 7 four tops at the moment. There's about 2 or 3 Bucks Fizzes.
There are 3 gas tops, just to be on the safe side, I believe. Well, certainly there actually are 2 gas tops these days. There's that guy from Geordie Shore who calls himself Gas Top.
What?
Yeah, really.
You should sue him.
Yeah, I know I should. Yeah, it can happen.
So, I was going to say, there's 3 prongs. There's absolutely faithful remaking of old cars, which is what Jaguar and Aston Martin are doing. Then you've got your
kind of freshening up an old design, doing it a little bit better.
Yeah, or there's actually a third branch, which is what Singer do, which is taking a sort of more modern Porsche and making it reminiscent of a very old one, but with all modern features.
Yeah, it's sort of kind of doing tremendous. Somebody's idea of the ultimate incarnation of this car. And
looks like
with the 911, you've got a tremendous platform to do that with, because you've got so many bits to choose from. And also, you've got the advantage that nice ones are going to be expensive enough that it's worth you putting all this time into doing that job. Because Singer, anyone who's seen films about Singer, Chris Harris did a good one amongst others. I mean, they really care about what they're doing, and they really do a tremendous job of making this magnificent incarnation of a classic design.
They've come a long way from making sewing machines, though. Let's be honest.
It's actually confusing. I have actually repaired a Singer sewing machine within the last 6 months.
Have you really?
Seriously, yeah.
It's all engineering.
Did you make it look like one from the late 60s?
You know what? I was able to check from the serial number that this Singer sewing machine, which still works, was made in 1892.
What?
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
It was my great-grandmother's sewing machine. An old Singer, hand-cranked.
Wow.
It's a lovely bit of machinery.
I've got one less than 10 feet away from you in that part of the attic, just up there.
Well, I bet it's almost exactly the same design, because there was this, and I'm sure people listening to this, some people will know this design, because it's an absolute classic bit of industrial design.
So,
very successful design. But we're talking about Singer. Slightly confusingly, of course, there was another car manufacturer called Singer.
Yes.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Were they French?
Yeah.
But they were British.
Singer Chamois was basically
the Hillman Imp.
A slightly
Coupe.
racier Hillman Imp.
Yeah, of course.
But so I don't know, what do they call it? Singer? Because I always think the word Resto-Mod, which I think they apply to sort of sympathetically modernising, or maybe not sympathetically modernising an old car to give it some modern features. And so you would say that like those flea repellent MGs are in that category, because they'll put in like a modern stereo or something like that, and they'll do various sort of tweaks to the suspension to try and make it drive in a more sort of modern, usable way. There was one quite recently, somebody took original shape Range Rovers and fitting them with
Chrysler V8s, probably. Yeah.
No, they're not. I think it's
powertrain?
all Range Rover Sport underneath, including like the whole chassis. Yeah, so you get. I think it's just the Land Rover V8 in there, the sort of more recent one. I think so. It's a great idea. It was an idea that a mate of mine had years ago. He went, those first generation Range Rovers are really cool, but also, they're a bit old and a bit flaky. Wouldn't it be great to like totally modernise one? Modern Range Rover underpinnings, but looking like a like 70s three-door Range Rover. Oh, that's a brilliant idea. You should do that, but he was a TV producer and he didn't have the workshop to do it in. So, but somebody is now doing it. And the demo car they had, which I've poked around but not driven, it's slightly sporty because it had really massive wheels on it and big wheel arch extensions. It just gave away too much. I like the idea with these cars that nobody knows. They look like a really pucker example of the original that's completely, purely as it was. And only you know a lot of the things that have been done to it that make it drivable every day.
So what vehicle would you do this to?
That was about to ask.
I've got one of my familiar.
I've got several, but go on, let's hear yours. What would be yours, Zach?
Volvo P1800. I had one years ago and I've always thought they were beautiful looking cars. Despite its age, it was really pretty reliable and lovely car to have and to drive. But it was a 1965 vehicle, and I always thought it would be fantastic to have a P1800S, but with more power and better handling and just better mechanicals under the skin. To look like that, but drive better. Basically, I want a souped-up P1800.
Would you insist on a contemporary Volvo engine in it, perhaps even a hybrid or the Polestar engine?
I'd be quite open-minded on the engine. I think if somebody was going to do a new 1800, I'm very open-minded. But V8 sounds good, I reckon.
Wow.
I think I'd like to give somebody a P1800 body shell and have them put a big V8 in it.
A big V8? I was going to say, what's the smallest V8 you could find in terms of...
let's
not volume, I'm talking about...
What about
let's
that
turn this
V8
into a
that was
monster,
in
come on.
XC90s and S80s?
Oh, yeah.
It was the Yamaha design.
Yeah.
Because it's quite compact as well, because it went crossways in the car, so that would probably fit in nicely.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always kind of imagine to probably do it with a Rover V8, but we're talking...
Well, if in doubt, put a Rover
But
V8
we're talking about
always.
a proper production, So, I'm going P1800.
Just on a geeky thing, which I don't know if you know this, was that engine, by any chance, in the Volvo, related to the V6, I think, that they had in a... Was it a Ford Thunderbird that had a Yamaha SHO engine?
No, that was the same V8.
It was the same engine. That's it wasn't a
Taurus.
Okay,
SHO.
So it was. The same engine. God, I thought, brain actually worked in some fashion there. I mean,
we know that if there wasn't more than one company already turning out, kind of new old Land Rovers, we know that a Land Rover would be your pick.
Yeah, what would it be, Richard?
What else?
I do rather covet those V8s that they're remaking. When they announced it, I told my wife about it, and she just went, "You're not," and I went, "No, it's 150 grand. I'm not." And she went, "Oh, okay, fair enough."
You are, though, aren't you?
Why are we telling me about this? And I went, well, first of all, because I thought you'd find it interesting, and secondly, because my job now is to try and convince Richard Hammond to buy one, so I can have a go in it. And he didn't need any convincing at all. By the time I rang him the next morning, he'd already made some other phone calls, because he is weak.
Can we play guessing?
Well, let us know what it's like.
Can we play guessing? I think you'd probably want a Rover 75 with, I don't know, Jag XFR underpinnings.
No, not really. No.
I know you like a Rover.
You could buy a ZT V8, which is broadly feels similar. Actually, a Rover SD1 that had been made to work properly would be rather good. But I'd have to have the whole body shell completely retooled, because one of the things that the Rover SD1, they actually never quite look as good as they should do. When you see the pictures of the clay models of that car, that's how they wanted it to look in an ideal world. See a real SD1, even one that's been beautifully restored, they're always a bit gappy, because they were built basically to Land Rover principles, where and apparently the principles of Land Rover were, just make all the panel gaps massive, because the whole thing's going to flex a bit off-road, and also
plus,
it just makes it easy to assemble.
a
little bit of a mistake, it doesn't matter.
Exactly, that's it. Exactly,
if you're planning on a 4mm gap, a half-millimetre either way doesn't matter.
I've told that story before on the show, about when they put one-touch windows into the Range Rover, and the supplier development on a rig worked perfectly, because they have to have rollback if they're one-touch up, otherwise you trap your hand. And then they sent them down to the factory, and the factory rang up and went, "They're not working. They keep rolling back. They get to the top and they roll back down again without anyone touching them." And the supplier went, "That's really weird. We're working to like this sort of industry standard 3mm tolerance." And factory went, well, that's where you're going wrong, mate. You see, we built the Range Rover to a 9mm tolerance.
9mm? I mean, that's just, you could get a cat through that.
medieval.
I know.
Intolerance.
That's the thing, but they did. It was like, minimises error. Well, so they believe, because you can just throw it on there and it's broadly all right. And that's how they started designing the cars. But cars don't need to have that flex built in. That's why apparently the Austin Maestro looked bloody awful, because it was gappy again.
Although that was
there's a number of reasons why
it looked terrible.
But they're gappy because that was designed down at Solihull.
Do you know what I'd do for you? I would build you a Rover SD1 out of a Ferrari Daytona.
Ooh, ironic.
That's a good start.
Yeah, exactly, because the SD1 was, the five-door hatch version of Daytona. Get a Daytona and stretch it and badge it Rover, leave that big, lovely Ferrari block in there. That'd be a car, wouldn't it?
What I was actually going to say, though, for my Resto-Mod or whatever, I was thinking Citroens.
Oh, yeah.
I had two things in mind. First of all, now the Citroen CX was meant to have, I believe, a flat engine, I think even a flat 6.
Oh, really?
Because the GS had a flat 4.
Yeah.
And then they ran out of money. It was the mid-70s and Citroen was at the sort of lowest ebb and then got bought by Peugeot because they were in such dire straits. Couldn't afford any engine shenanigans, had to use sort of bog standard straight 4. So what I would love to do is a resto-modded Citroen CX. An early one, I think, because they're quite pretty on the delicate chrome bumpers. But have a sort of fairly low-tune Porsche flat 6 put in there. Because you don't want a lot of power, because they're front-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And it's quite an engineering job, I think, to probably get that in there. But just to almost create what Citroen never could create, a flat 6-powered Citroen CX with all mod cons. Again, I might have to have the body retooled, because they're quite gappy as well. I don't know what they were doing in the 70s. There was stamping.
Well, they were mixing plastic panels with steel panels.
No, not at that point they were. I think plastic came in sort of the early 80s. The BX was very plasticky, had plastic bonnet.
That was the first one to have the plastic panels,
And
you're
then,
right,
yeah,
wasn't it?
but no, I think it was just, I don't know, idleness. I'm not sure what was going on.
I think for a Citroen, though, I might go a little bit further back. I'd go for Citroen Traction Avant.
Oh,
of course you would.
Yeah. No,
All right,
I'd skip over the DS.
Yeah.
DS is almost perfect as it. Come on.
No, hear me out here, because this is what I was going to... My CX was a sort of side thought. I'm thinking DS with a Tesla drivetrain.
There you go.
Make
There
it
you go.
as modern / futuristic as it's always looked.
Yes.
And imagine cruising
Very
around in
Silently.
that lovely silent way on your soft suspension. And with all that amazing visibility out these thin pillars and just sort of the thin wheel. And just, I mean, imagine, that is a proper... And genuinely, I think that would be an amazing
seriously,
thing.
that could work. Various little niche companies do electric conversions.
Yeah.
You've spoken about this for ages, haven't you?
Yeah. I've always thought the old Fiat 500 would make a tremendous, modern electric city car. You sent me a link the other day to a Porsche 914 that somebody had electrified.
Yeah.
It wasn't the first one that I'd come across. So, this thing of taking an old classic but giving it an electric drivetrain, it's being done, so why not do it with a DS?
There's a touch I'm having in my electric Tesla-powered DS, which is, again, the dashboard will look absolutely as it did at first glance.
But
when you look at the instruments, that'll actually be a TFT screen.
I knew you were going to say that.
And it'll have sort of...
It'll show Logan's
50s
run on the other
sci-fi
side.
graphics,
Okay.
I think. And there'll be some other touches as well. There may, in fact, be a TFT set into the dashboard that looks like part of the dashboard.
And for absolute authenticity...
Controls, though. I don't know what
No, it's not. It's just for the Bluetooth.
Okay, cool.
And for absolute authenticity, it would have glitches in it as well. So the speedo would waggle around a little bit over about 5 miles per hour.
No, I don't want that. If I wanted that, I'd buy an old Maestro.
Let's make the thing work properly.
I want it to feel like I can go in and
great
work
machine.
every day.
Somebody please do it. Make us an electric DS.
As you know, I would either have a Lancia HPE rebuilt with, like you said, Tesla running gear, like I've said, built in Wales, or even better, I think. And I've got the T-shirt on actually at the moment, or the sweatshirt. I had this custom built, this T-shirt actually.
I was going to ask about that because I noticed it was your.
You can buy these. Well, I should explain that on the sweatshirt or T-shirt long sleeve that I'm wearing at the moment, I've got a picture of a Gilban Invader on mini lights. Right, you can buy this shirt from Redbubble, but you can only get the saloon. So I got in touch and said, would you draw me the Shooting Brake estate version? And they did. And could you put it on mini lights as well? It says Gwych underneath it, which is Welsh for great, because it is. So I'd have a Gilban Invader estate, but I'd have the estate that they never built. They never made a Mark III Gilbert Invader estate. They only made the Mark II. They made a Mark III saloon. So I'd have a Mark III estate built specialist. And I'd have the rear suspension. I'd have something proper put in, fully independent suspension. Because, Rick Jones, do you remember Finger Bobs?
Yes.
Remember
Yes.
the programme Fingerbobs? Rick Jones used to live in the UK and he had a Gilbert Invader, and he got in touch with me recently after I made that programme about Gilbert for BBC Wales. And he said, it was a great car, built it myself. And my God, the handling was very lively in the wet. It was actually dangerous. So I've always wanted an Invader, but I wouldn't have one if it was dangerous. So I'd have an Invader built. I don't know, I'd probably have the Integrale running gear in it. I'd have it four-wheel drive, fully independent suspension, red, built in Wales, mini lights. I'd be happier than kissing Noddy Holder.
Can I just close this off with something else, another avenue that we can maybe explore another time?
Go on.
Cars that you wish existed, modern cars maybe that you wish existed. Now, the reason I mentioned this is I just remembered it.
This is a very open-ended subject.
It is.
Yeah.
I'll just close it off with one example
of
something that came tantalisingly close and that you would have probably liked. I was on Twitter the other day and I just happened to mention that I'd happened to have noticed that Jag F-types are down to about 30 grand now, which feels like sort of quite...
For the V6?
For the V6S, which I was thinking is the one to have, in the convertible particularly. And I happened to mention this. And then, for it is he, Jaguar designer Ian Callum himself popped up and went, you should get one then, or something. And I went, well, I would if I didn't have this, and put up a picture of my Porsche. And he wrote back, I see, right, okay. And I went, honestly, I would have one. It's just that, I've already got that. And also the Porsche has seats in the back and the F-Type doesn't. And, and kids in the Porsche. And he went, yeah, it's a shame because we actually designed an F-Type 2+2, which would have solved that problem, but with a long roof and a wagon back. So it was an F-type shooting brake.
I know, I have to say, because I follow both you and Ian Callum, I saw that entire conversation. And when he said that, I almost ejaculated, I have to say, because I love the F-type. The F-type shooting brake. Oh, and the other thing, of course, is something we have to discuss one day. Cars we wish never existed. Like the Suzuki X90. Hello, I am Sergey Sirotkin, top racing driver person. I cannot wait for my first Grand Prix with the Williams team, where I will prove that I am not just a paid driver. And if you agree to be my fan this season, I will give you $20. Simples.
Sniff Petrol with Gareth Jones on speed!
I noticed recently that Formula E have announced what they call their Gen 2 car. I suppose the car that we're on at the moment is Gen 1.5 because they did something to the nose that inherited that whole robo-race nose thing that made the car look better. But the new generation Gen 2 Formula E car, I think, will run in the season that starts at the end of 2018 and runs into 2019, is quite exciting and interesting and a bit of a departure. Because the current Formula E car looks a bit fragile and thin and spindly. Whereas the Gen 2 car looks properly futuristic. It's raked back. It's got a bit more bodywork around the back. It's got a bit of, could be LMP, prototype about it, which I think is not a bad thing. So it's sort of moving away from the classic single-seater open wheel look to something absolutely unique. And that's good for Formula E. I think that's what Formula E needs to do, because at the moment Formula E looks like a kind of a Formula 3 car, a kind of weaker, thinner Formula 1 car. It doesn't look as good as Formula 1, so it automatically, in people's minds, sets it up as being sub-Formula 1.
Yeah.
So if you were going to design a race car, what would you do? What would be the perfect race car for you? Would it be a classic car of the 1950s with Tesla running gear? Here we go again. Or would it be something ultra-futuristic, like something from, I don't know, F-Zero, the video game? Where would you two go?
I don't think sports cars have ever really got better than that sort of high point in the mid-70s when you had GT40s and 917s and Ferrari 512s and that,
that's true.
That era, there were a whole bunch of terrific looking cars.
What about Group C of the 80s though?
They were good.
Yes, they were.
6.2s and XJR9s and that Mazda.
Yeah, but you've got some little bits of weirdness going on in the Group C with sort of some of the enclosed wheels at the back, for example.
Yeah.
That kind of spoiled it for me. So in terms of the overall look, really that mid-70s era, it doesn't get much better than sort of...
Oh, no, well, sure. Sorry, I just yawned then. You're not boring me, I'm just really tired. No, because as soon as you said 917, I went, okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's just, yeah.
And GT40, I mean, yeah,
GT40,
it's just so, you know,
yeah.
I mean, those two cars, you know, when you say... You know,
if we can just go back a little bit further in time, 250 LM as well. I always like those.
It's interesting, though, that you two have gone for sports cars and not Formula One cars. Nobody's mentioned the Lotus 72. Nobody's mentioned the beauty of the first Jordan, for instance. Formula One cars. You went for sports cars. What does that say about our psychology, gentlemen?
He started it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
I agree with him.
I don't want to get into psychoanalysis, but again, I mean, and you know, one doesn't want to sound too nostalgic because we love the future. But there's no doubt that current cars in F1, in open wheel racing, they don't look anything like as good as, Lotus 72, as any number of Ferraris throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
When did F1 cars
we know
really
too much.
You
know,
they just became
2000s. I think really the point at which we had what I call the potato peeler nose was that 2008. They'd become hirsute. There were too many bits sticking off and too many aerodynamic addenda.
Yeah, what about when the noses went longer in the 90s?
Yeah, I was going to say, sort of late 90s was really when...
They looked so sort of agile and neat, the shorter F1 cars, up until the late 80s. And then obviously, you know, your sort of 70s stuff is particularly sort of petite and all the better for it. And I know there's lots of safety reasons why they sort of got longer nose and stuff like that, but just aesthetically, it really kind of spoiled things, and it was just downhill from there onwards. It was sort of the more powerful CAD cam and all of the aero races that, and of course, Cat's coming into the room definitely changed things.
You said CAD cam.
Cat
cam. Hello, Finn. Finn, what car would you choose? A Jaguar?
I tell you what, I tell you the race car that I would love somebody to design is an electric-only race car that I could get really excited by. Because I've got to be honest, although I love the idea of Formula E and I have enjoyed some of the racing, I'm really not very engaged by it. It doesn't grab me in the way that Formula One and endurance car racing have. And part of that does have to do with the lack of the sound of the engines.
Having said that,
I would like to somebody to come with a really convincing electric race car. I just don't know how you do that.
The sound of the engines thing is interesting because I remember when we went to Le Mans a few years ago and the diesel Audis were running. All we heard was the vortices coming off the wings and perhaps the turbo.
They weren't silent.
They certainly didn't hear the engine, but they made a noise.
You would, as they were coming into the corners, you could hear all of the air being sucked into the... They sounded like a jet fighter coming into the corners. They were not silent by any means. They sounded exciting.
Actually, up close... Well, you've been to Formula E racing, haven't you? Battersea Park. Up close, the Formula E cars make a bit of noise. There's
they
some
do.
gear whine and things, which is not very exciting. But I find it quite weird and fascinating that you could hear tyre squeal and things, which you never normally hear, of course, in racing.
And those tyres squeal a lot because they've not got a lot of grip, haven't they?
Yeah, and it is very good racing because if you look at the drivers in Formula E right now, it's an amazing quality of driver throughout the field. Driving identical cars, it's very, very close racing. So I kind of feel like I should like it more than I do, but it just doesn't really engage me.
Formula E's problem, I think we've said this in the programme before, is you never quite know when the next race is going to be. Are we actually on season at the moment? Have we had a race? Is there going to be one?
Yeah, the seasons are split. The tax year, they're split across sort of... it's the 17-18 season. What? There's a race this weekend, there's one next weekend, and then there's not one for 3 months. And that is really disorientating. Did you see the Formula E last weekend? There was Formula E last weekend. Where? I was in New York. What? It's very perplexing at the moment. It's hard to get into a rhythm with it, but even though I think it's got quite a lot of potential.
But is it going to realise that? The audiences for motor racing are surely harder to track. There's more balkanisation. You haven't got quite the same sort of readily identifiable bunch of motor racing fans to go out and market to, particularly when you're marketing something that is a different kind of racing.
Interesting that Formula One is releasing what they call OTT services at the moment. I hate that word, by the way. It makes you think that Chris Tarrant is going to be presenting Formula One from now on. Do you remember OTT?
The late night version of Tiswas.
They're offering streaming services around the world for Formula One now, but not in the UK. Well, there'll be a limited, what do they call it, F1 Plus, I think. The OTT service will roll out around the world.
So does that mean that all we have to do is set up a VPN thing and then we can stream it in the UK.
I hadn't thought
I
of
saw
that.
something
but you're
yesterday
right.
that said that you won't be able to VPN your way around it.
Really?
I don't know how they can do that, but yeah, apparently.
I will ask someone that knows a bit more about VPN than these. And
I always get
for me and see
VPN
it.
confused with VPL, which is visible
Right,
panty.
okay, yes, you want to be, I would...
I mean, I don't get it confused in as much as, like, I...
Careful there, cowboy, you could get into a lot of trouble.
No, but it's just when people, you know, when your brain just makes associations that aren't there and shouldn't be there.
Yeah,
All the
Every
time.
time someone
Absolutely.
says, I went to China once with work, and someone said, well, you only be able to use the internet normally. You need to get yourself a VPN. And I was thinking, well, I need
What,
to
you
wear
got
pants with leggings over the top of something. That's a bit weird. I digress.
You certainly did. On the subject of that which is to come in motorsport, I'm very pleased that the LMP1 lineup for Le Mans, and indeed all of the WEC, is emerging now. I've got a piece of paper here. Let me just draw it up. So I
We've
don't
got-
quite remember.
There are 5 teams lining up alongside Toyota, I think, which is much better than I thought it was going to be. Really.
Yep.
It's,
Rebellion will be fielding 2 cars with their own chassis, the Rebellion R13, which is in fact an Orica chassis, of course.
There's
Done that
another one.
before.
I always think of Orca, the whales.
and the slightly disappointing film.
I haven't seen it, but I'll take your
I
word
haven't seen
for
it for so long.
Yeah.
It's-
Not as good as Jaws. But it was better than Sturgeon. That was a terrible film about a Scottish politician who
Better than
bit
the
people in
Deep,
half.
which
Yeah.
was Jack
The
Nicholson.
Deep. Oh, that was dreadful, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, Pete
terrible.
Benchley got that one wrong, didn't he? So, yeah, Rebellion, who I'm going to be really backing this year because we quite a close relationship with Rebellion. They've given us great access in the past. Neil Gianni drove for the team historically, and that's how he ended up at Porsche. And now he's back at Rebellion, there being no more Porsche. So I should be backing the Rebellion against the Empire. Although, the trouble is, I do want Toyota to finally win Le Mans. But
Yeah,
what are we going to do? They're the only hybrid team. Is it fair? The ACO are doing what they can to make it fair, aren't they? They're trying to level the playing field between the hybrids and the non-hybrids.
I just think it's a real tragedy for Toyota that they don't have any hybrid competition this year. I would really love them to be able to compete this year and actually win against a team that they could say were on a par.
Yeah.
Because I guess Toyota have to be the favourites this year, but they're going to beat teams that aren't running hybrid cars. And even if they've got technical equivalency things going on, which they have, but I haven't quite figured out how those rules work out. So
It's going to be managed by fuel flow and the size of the fuel tank and how long they can go between stints. That's
Right.
how they're going to balance it up. But it's the equivalent of Man United taking on Brentford FC, if I can use a football analogy, whereas Brentford will be allowed to field a team of 15 people. But Man United are only allowed to have a team of 10. That's how they're going to do it. They
Okay.
have an advantage in some way and a disadvantage in others.
Yes.
So you're right. Is it going to be a hollow victory? Oh, I hope it isn't. I hope the balance is fair.
I just think it's a terrible shame that if Toyota win this year, which they probably will, then they're doing it against not quite equal competition.
Well, for instance, one of their competitors is the Bicollis racing team, who are a ruddy shambles, let's be honest. They've been trying to run at Le Mans for years and years now, and last year their Nissan engine gave up after the first lap despite complete rebuild beforehand.
It was very early on, wasn't it? Yeah.
I used to be interested in Bicollis. I was Bicollis curious. Yeah. Sorry.
Tish.
Thank you.
It's here all week. Don't
Now,
forget to try the veal.
The other LMP1 teams running are, well, they're branded as CEFC TRSM Racing.
Are they the Russian ones?
No, it's Manor. It's actually Manor. Hey up. Aye.
Why are they using an assumed name?
I'm not entirely certain. It's to do with sponsorship, branding and partnerships. But they're running the Ginetta confusingly named G60 LTP1 chassis. Because Ginetta's G60 is actually their road car. They have a road car which used to be the Farbood that they now build.
So,
It's not that, though. It's an LMP1 with the same
it's a very
name.
Yorkshire entry, that then, isn't it?
Right. And they've got Mechachrome engines. We'll see how that goes, because Ginetta, they even built a LMP car. I know Ginetta bought out Zytec, so Zytec used to make an LMP car a while back. But is it going to be any good? Manor are good, though, so there's hope.
Yeah, they like them.
Yeah, the two Toyotas, and then this Dragon Speed American team who are running the BR Engineering BR1 with a Gibson engine, which is the Lara chassis.
This is very confusing.
It is, isn't it? Yeah,
Can't everyone just use your proper names? Stop mucking about.
Yeah, it really is. But you can do that. You look at Haas. Haas are running a Dallara chassis, effectively.
I guess so, yeah.
It does happen.
So's the Alpha 4C.
Is that a Dallara builder?
Yeah. Well, they designed the chassis, yeah.
Did they? Yeah. I didn't know that. How interesting. And then the other two competitors are SMP Racing. Did you know SMP is a Russian bank? And that's why this team is called SMP Racing. Yeah. Which is why you've got Vitaly Petrov and Mikhail Alashin as the lead drivers in those cars. And the car is a BR Engineering car again.
Which, let me guess, is really a Peugeot 205.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, it is utterly confusing. But that's your lot.
Really weird.
That's your LMP1. And that's really why we go to Le Mans. Although last year it was the GTs that entertained us, wasn't it?
Well, I always go mainly for the
Drinking.
For the P1.
Oh, the P1, yes. Yes.
Bit of drinking on the side, and then I kind of skip over LMP2, not so bothered about that, and also follow the GT racing. And the last 2 or 3 years, we've had absolutely spectacular competition in P1. And
Finn agrees.
We were talking before about the fact that I really did wonder whether I wanted to go to Le Mans this year. I thought quite hard about whether I might give it a miss, because I'm really disappointed that the manufacturer involvement has completely fallen away. So there's now only Toyota turning up with an insanely complicated and brilliant bit of technology to run in that top category.
It's a
real shame that there isn't any competition for that, because when you had Audi and Porsche and Toyota scrapping for the overall win, that was a really titanic and,
a battle of
wonderful
giants.
struggle. I thought.
Yeah.
And are you sure, though, that, in fact, Audi and Porsche aren't still in it, but it's just the car's now called, like, the Dragonfly Hat Stand Fridge Freezer or something?
If only.
It probably is. We just haven't got to the bottom of this yet. They're a Russian bank,
That gets you into the interesting thing, that the only downside of this generation of hybrid P1 cars that we're just seeing the back of, the only downside of them is that what privateer would be able to run one in a few years' time? Or if you wanted to run one, in a sort of classic race in 10 years' time or something, who, other than the manufacturer, would be able to keep that car running? So this year's different. I really wondered whether I'd be excited enough by the P1 race. And I just decided that actually the GT race is enough.
Yeah, we love the Ford GTs. We love the Aston Martins.
It's a bonus for me this year. Well,
the Corvettes.
Got Corvette, Aston Martin, Porsche, Ferrari, BMW. It's been a great...
The gang's all here.
The gang is all there, and it's going to...
And with a view to the future, the ACO are still working out the rules for what's going to happen beyond 2021, I think. And one possibility, which is a strong possibility, is something that we mooted almost jokingly on the programme not that long ago, that really they should let the hypercars run at Le Mans. It should be the Valkyrie, the Red Bull Aston Martin Valkyrie. Called it a Red Bull, it's Aston Martin, isn't it? Aston Martin Valkyrie against the Mercedes-Benz P1, whatever that thing's called.
It's called the...
Is it the P1?
No. What is it called? Something
I can't remember.
The Mercedes-Benz.
That one.
That thing,
That very fast Mercedes. You know the one.
Yeah.
You saw it on the computer the other week. That's right.
Project One.
Project One, thank you. Against the Ferrari FXX or something like that. These were the cars running at the front of Le Mans. I think they'd have to probably get a bigger grandstand. And with that thought, we'll say goodbye. You'll be listening to Zog.
Goodbye.
And Richard.
Goodbye.
And I was Gareth. See ya, probably at Le Mans.
Well, actually, my name's not Richard now. It's Greensleeve 7X/2. But I'm based on a Richard.
Based on an original idea by Richard.
I'm built by a porter.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site, follow us on Twitter, or to find out about sponsorship opportunities, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whizbang.
On the 4th of March this year, we lost a valuable ally of this programme. Ana-Marie Borg passed away. Anna sang on a number of Gareth Jones on Speed songs over the years, such as I Got the McLaren. She took the lead vocals on Back to Black.
Oh, be strong now.
Ana sang live with us too on stage in the On Speed band at 10 years on Speed. We didn't know it on the night, but this was to be the last time we sang together before the ravages of lung cancer made it impossible for Ana to perform live anymore.
24 hours of racing, gonna stay awake all night.
She was beautiful, funny, a great singer. She loved cars and driving, and a very close friend of mine for over 30 years. It breaks my heart to think that she's no longer around. But her voice remains, and here she is, singing Amphibious.
To be amphibious would be tremendous. Something to assist us. The sea would not resist us. Amphibious, 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 amphibious. Everywhere I look, Top Gear, YouTube, Gareth Jones on speed. Everyone wants to float in a car that can be driven on land and driven on water. I don't know if such a thing is possible without compromises. 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 My love for you is amphibious. Yes. The desire to develop it is insidious. I know it sounds ridiculous. As a vehicle, you drive me wild. You're amphibious. Wheeled cars have large round protuberances jutting into the water, so amphibians produce hydrodynamic drag. They can't help it. They're amphibians. The future is so uncertain for cars that will let us fly, but cars that go on land and sea are achievable. And the Gibbs a quarter, Gibbs a quarter, Gibbs a quarter.
once more and I'll do it.
Gareth Jones on speed! Speed! Speed!